You step off the plane in Tokyo, and the sensory overload hits. Every sign, every announcement, every menu is completely indecipherable. The standard advice dictates that you need years of expensive classes, a dedicated tutor, and endless patience just to ask for basic directions. This graphic shows a 90-day window, starting from absolute zero. In that short time frame, it is possible to go from barely stammering out a greeting to ordering off a local menu, understanding native content, and actually building relationships. This rapid transformation relies on a biological approach to learning, focusing on how the brain naturally processes new information rather than following a traditional academic syllabus. When you decide to learn Japanese, the typical curriculum looks terrifying. Memorize thousands of kanji, drill complex grammar structures, buy an entire stack of textbooks. People dedicate years to these methods. Yet the quit rate sits around 95%, and many who endure the study still freeze up when a cashier asks them a simple question. There is an alternative blueprint available. We can observe how human beings acquire their very first language. Children do not study grammar first. They listen. They absorb isolated words. They string those into simple phrases. They begin to recognize patterns. Formal grammar rules only come years later to classify what they already know. To test this, I set a 90-day countdown to learn Japanese using exclusively this biomimicry framework. Acquiring a language through pattern recognition mimics the natural biological process of learning, removing the friction of memorizing abstract grammar rules. The first major trap for a beginner is the dictionary. Trying to learn tens of thousands of words guarantees burnout. This chart shows everyday speech distribution. Instead of an entire dictionary, there's a massive concentration at the start. Just 1,000 high-frequency words make up daily conversation. Words like eat, go, see, and friend. These foundational blocks appear in almost every sentence. Acquiring them requires only 20 to 30 minutes of daily targeted flashcard repetition. Once those core words are in place, the second pillar takes over, the 90% immersion law. This graphic compares two distinct approaches. A traditional learner spends almost all their time buried in a textbook, with a fraction dedicated to audio. This system flips that ratio entirely. That means flooding your ears with Japanese audio while walking the dog, eating lunch, or commuting to work. At first, the audio sounds like continuous noise, but slowly your brain catches those high-frequency words. Then isolated phrases emerge. Eventually, full sentences separate and snap into focus. Passive listening does not instantly build vocabulary. It wires the brain's audio processing centers to recognize the language's natural cadence and boundaries. Then comes the third pillar, the hardest barrier for any learner: opening your mouth and speaking. Early output is brutal. The pronunciation is rough. You make hundreds of embarrassing mistakes, relying entirely on AI conversation apps or the patience of local store staff to stumble through a basic thought. But every single one of those mistakes acts as an essential feedback loop. They actively calibrate your brain to what sounds right and what feels wrong. By day 45, those feedback loops start to compound. You walk up to a convenience store counter to buy a drink. The cashier asks a standard routine question. Instead of the usual hesitation, the response comes instantly. This reply occurs before the English translation can even form in your mind. This interaction marks the first time a high-frequency exchange has become automated, signaling that the brain is starting to bypass the slow process of internal translation. Eliminating that internal translation step frees up a massive amount of mental bandwidth. From that point on, conversational fluency accelerates rapidly. Hitting that milestone halfway through the timeline raises a practical question. How do you sustain that momentum without burning out? The exact daily schedule starts with 20 minutes of morning vocabulary review, followed by 30 minutes of passive listening in the afternoon. It continues into the evening with 20 minutes of speaking practice and finishes with 10 minutes of simple reading at night. The total commitment is heavily compartmentalized, requiring just 1 to 2 hours a day. Small daily progress accumulates rapidly. It easily outpaces exhausting, intense weekly pram sessions that eventually lead to frustration and quitting. Language acquisition operates exactly like physical training. It relies entirely on relentless consistency rather than fleeting bursts of motivation. When the timeline hits the final mark, the challenge is complete. You can order food with confidence. You can understand native YouTube videos. You can form actual relationships. This level isn't flawless, native perfection. There are still vocabulary gaps, but it is highly functional, conversational fluency. The total silence and helplessness of the first day is gone, replaced by the ability to navigate a foreign environment with ease. The choice is straightforward. You can keep waiting for the perfect textbook, or you can start listening, speaking, and making mistakes today. 90 days will pass regardless. You decide whether you will be speaking a new language when they end, or wishing you had started today.